And I can see Julian has already joined the call. Julian Mair, who is our next speaker. Hi, Julian. We can see your video. Yes, and you're unmuted at the moment already. So Julian Mair is actually, as you can see, this conference, we are trying to go a little bit outside of our privacy bubble, so to speak, and we are inviting not only privacy experts to speak about privacy, but also people from the business side, which, as much as I don't like to really separate and pick sides here, but still people who are not, whose job is not privacy 100% of the time, it's also important to bring them in the conversation. And so Julian is one of those people as well. He is also a privacy enthusiast, and I have to admit that I get a lot of inspiration from him. But Julian's work is actually sales representative, and he has years of experience of selling privacy first products, which I find fascinating. I'm so thankful that you are speaking here. So Julian is going to talk about his personal experience about selling a privacy product. And before I go ahead and give the stage to you, I'm going to ask you, how do you prefer to have questions? Do you want them rather to have questions in the end of the presentation, or as they appear, or what is easier for you?
I think I like Jason's approach a lot, actually.
Okay.
He said, like, if there is something which just fits this slide and is
all right,
if very specific on the slide, let's just do it right away, and the rest.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm here. I'm going to switch off my video, but I'm here any moment. And if I'm switching it on the video, you know that there is a question coming up. But other than that, you're welcome to also address to me.
Perfect. And I'm just quickly trying to set my screen up. All right. Yeah, thanks a lot, Masha, for having me. I really enjoyed the previous talks, which I was also enthusiastically watching. When you asked me actually to give a talk on my personal experience on selling privacy products, I have to admit that I struggled a bit to know where to start, because there is probably so much to talk about. But I hope this talk now brings you some value, and it's basically how much I describe selling privacy products, and based on my personal experience at the company Wire. But I will start with the part I'm very sure about, which is a quick intro about myself. So I'm 29 years old, living in Berlin, having a marketing and IT background. And I would describe myself as a privacy enthusiast who built up sales at Wire. And at the end of my time at Wire, I was responsible for customers like the German government, for example. And now I'm basically working on a new startup idea where I'm trying to bring privacy into the mental health space. So before joining Wire, I had the feeling that very often software is easy to use or it is privacy focused. But I rarely saw both of them in the same software solution. And it simply struck me that, that we were not able to bring these two worlds together. And what we also saw very often was basically that when two of this type of products competed, we very often have the not so privacy focused one winning against the other one. A good example probably is WhatsApp, which has billions of users nowadays. And if we sum up all the other users from other privacy focused messenger solutions, we don't even reach the same number. So I think the core issue which we had since a long time or since decades is basically that privacy tools were rarely easy to use. And if that's the case, I think it was very often a lost game from the get-go. And people simply chose the solution which was easy to use because it simply solved their problem which they had. Like for WhatsApp, for example, easily texting with their friends. But very often they simply didn't see the risk behind it. Like when you upload your address book on WhatsApp, you identify all your contacts in your address book. Like WhatsApp can basically create a very nice social graph around you, around your friends, and simply knows who you're connected with, and also gets the real names of people. And another example probably is PGP. Like it's very easy to send an unencrypted email to someone because you just need an email address of this other person. But everyone can read this email because it's unencrypted. Sending this email or the same email via PGP is simply more cumbersome. Even though it's a great technology, the mainstream never picked it up because it simply was very hard to use. At university, I was writing a thesis on mass surveillance and the tools which are used today. And I compared this actually with the book of George Orwell, 1984. And in the second thesis, I wrote about if GDPR is a chance for underdogs like Wire. And that also brought me to Wire itself. So I joined the company in 2017 with the goal to basically bring privacy to mainstream. I simply had this idea that if there's a product which is very easy to use and comes with all the security and privacy aspects built into, people have to use it because there is simply no reason anymore why they should not, because all the features they want are there, but also all the security and privacy is there. So Wire seemed to me the perfect opportunity where I can combine my passion to technology and to privacy with a job which simply pays my bills at the end of the month. So for the ones who don't know Wire, it's an end-to-end encrypted messenger with security and privacy as USP. And it's fully open source, so you can basically audit the code, and it's very transparent from that angle. When I joined Wire, it was focusing on B2C, so the consumer market. And nowadays it's mainly focusing on B2B, so businesses only. I joined Wire as a marketing intern, where I was working on campaigns to simply get the brand name out as a B2C product, and represented it at different events and conferences where I was talking about the solution. Then later on, during the first 6 months as an intern, Wire started working on a business product. And so I switched into the product development. And there I was working with a colleague of mine to simply figure out how this new business tool of Wire should look like. What are people willing to pay? What should we charge for? And simply what features should we offer in order to compete with solutions like Skype for Business, Slack, and Microsoft Teams, for example. When we had a good understanding about this business offering, we simply needed salespeople. For me, it was a quite logical step that the two people of us, like me and my colleague in the product development, that we fill this gap. Because we simply talk to over 300 people. We know what they want, and we simply try to also solve their problems now in the sales department. And so early on, I was working with customers already to basically solve their problems of having GDPR compliant communication in their company. And in the early days, we basically divided our customers just based on the language. So if a customer didn't feel comfortable speaking English to my colleague, I just took over. And especially in the German market, this was a huge factor. And so within this 4 years at Wire, I basically grew from catering SMBs to enterprises and eventually to the public sector and government customers. But there is a catch to that. I actually don't like salespeople. And when I started in the sales department, I also said, I kind of know what I need to do, but my disclaimer is I'm not a salesperson. So I just need to figure out how this works. And I will just do my best. And when I grew into this sales role, I was basically coming into this space as a privacy advocate who simply tried to solve customers' problems and still make Wire mainstream. And the reason why I say I don't like salespeople is simply because when I was working at our family business in Italy, I simply had I mostly had bad experience with salespeople because they never really tried to solve my problem. They always tried to convince me about a product I didn't need, or they just wanted to tell me their sales pitch to basically check my name off from their daily list. So in the end of the day, everyone lost time. And I didn't really see much value in this. So I kind of knew when I'm moving into this space, I simply don't want to be such a salesperson. I just want to give my customers a better experience than I got back then. And especially in Germany, there was simply a huge need for a solution like Wire. And we got quite some traction, especially on my sales side, because I was mainly working with these German customers. And the more traction we got, we also had to hire new salespeople basically to basically cater for all this interest we got from prospects. And when new people were joining the sales team, all of them were much more experienced than I was in this field. And some even had more than 15 years of experience selling very known products and working at very known companies. But I still noticed that they were all struggling to sell this product. And they also just continued struggling with it over time. Whereas I was hitting my annual target constantly. So, and it took me a while to kind of understand what's going wrong here. And I tried to distill a few things. And one thing I would say is basically, I would say that standard salespeople were simply not successful at selling privacy products, at least with the experience I had at Wire. And what I mean with standard is basically, usually in sales, you have this different phases, like the pre-sales part, then the actual sales part where you try to close the actual commercial deal. And then afterwards to simply have this customer success part where you try to get the customer up and running with the solution. And a tool like Wire was simply more demanding. And I think most of the privacy focused products are mostly more complex because they simply need to solve, in order to get to the same result, for example, like a video call like we do here over Zoom now, a privacy focused company like Wire had to do much more to basically get to the same number of participants in a call, for example. And so we as salespeople, we were simply faced with lots of limitations from day one. And we also had to convince the security and legal people about the security and privacy aspects of the product. But still, in the end of the day, provide a decent quality, because the only thing the end user cares about is that the product actually works. And so you basically needed much more an approach which is much more hands-on, I would say. And that is simply not what you see when selling other products like Microsoft Teams, for example, which just kind of works out of the box. And then we also had this problem that when people compared us with market leaders, they didn't really understood how they should really compare us, because they simply had a list with 2 columns. One is Microsoft Teams, one is Wire. And when basically going through a list of features, Wire was just losing in that list, because we couldn't get all the features which Microsoft Teams, for example, has. We eventually would get there, but it takes time, and it just needs more resources to build this. And so in this direct comparison, we simply struggled. And in order to basically educate the customer about these limitations and why they often are even why they even have good reasons sometimes to actually protect the customer, the sales people had to be experts in the field. So they had to be very much aware of the privacy implication a certain feature might have. For example, the analytics part, which exists in Microsoft Teams or in Slack, that also brings risk depending on your threat model. And that basically meant that as a salesperson, or you are an expert in this privacy aspect, or you simply struggle a lot to understand why the customer is actually not buying. And as I mentioned before, privacy-focused products, they tend to be more complex than the ones who simply don't focus on privacy. And we also tried at Wire to outsource, for example, technical deployment or sales via channel partners. But what I've seen, it rarely worked, or it actually never really worked. And the reason is basically because you cannot really build up the knowledge you have internally about your complex solution in another organization which has no direct access to your developers. And so in the end of the day, I think you need a very holistic business model, and where you basically offer the customer all the needs he has about the support, about the deployment in-house. And probably a good example here is Red Hat, which basically develops open source technology, but also offers commercial packages to cater for all this needs of customers. And as a privacy-focused product, you're hopefully also not tracking your customers. And in sales, very often, you simply see this enrichment tools which try to analyze who visited your website, and they try to give you a good or detailed profile of who those people are. But what I've seen, usually they are just very much useless, because it's more like a guessing game in the end of the day, that they just give you a name of a company which might have visited your website, but for you as a salesperson, it's just guessing in the end of the day to figure out who was it really. So the good news here is you don't really need those tools, and you can just ignore them. And if you basically really understand your target audience, you can reach out to them in an honest way and don't try to track them all the way long. And you just need to have a good product market fit. I think there's a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly jump in just because you're talking about something that I have a question about. There is this sort of mindset that, well, in speaking about privacy, there's often this mindset of if you have privacy by design, or if you are a product that is privacy first, you need to sacrifice something else. So it is like privacy versus security, or privacy versus marketing very often, or privacy versus sales. And do you really think that, or what is your opinion on that generally, that you really need to sacrifice sales and marketing if you are privacy oriented, privacy friendly, because you don't have, say, or you don't, it's not that you don't have, but you don't prioritize analytics and tracking and targeting and things like that. I'm not a specialist myself, but I hear a lot that they can be a great help.
I mean, it's often also a question of how deep you do this. Like, I think the aspect you mean are going more into this analytics part, like for example, Google Analytics and so on, where I would say, especially in privacy focused products, you have to be very careful what you do there. And obviously, if you try to measure any data there, I would say keep this data in-house, because it's otherwise it's always a bit like you're telling Big Brother that this other person was here, where at the same time you want to protect this one customer from this other Big Brother. The part, what I mean here is a bit like there are this enrichment tools which basically give you which basically do something what we heard in the previous talk actually, where you simply know a part of the name, the email address, for example, and they simply enrich this two parts of a person with all the other data which is available there, and which very often complete the profile, right? And luckily, they don't really work well in Europe, simply because they don't do so. Basically, when GDPR was implemented, they kind of also block data mining in Europe. So those tools in general work better overseas, at least until today. Let's see what the Californian Privacy Act does about that. But in the end of the day, I think it's they're just not worth the effort in the first place, because if you have a good product market fit, you know your audience, and if you just talk to them in a honest way, you will understand what problems they have and who else might have those problems as well, and then you can just reach out. And if your offering and your message is interesting, people will reply. Easy as that.
That's a good answer.
But I think also the prerequisite for this is actually on my next slide. In order to not constantly fight about this, because it's also a question like, if you're building new features, or if you think about putting analytics into your product, it's also a question, how much privacy do we want to give our customer? And I think to simply avoid all this discussions in the first place, or to simply have better discussions around this, you also need a very strong company culture around privacy. So if everyone agrees that this product should do its best to protect the customer's privacy, I mean, there's no discussion to build huge analytics engine, or to use certain tools or not. Like for data mining or enrichment. And in the end of the day, I think this also, when you basically go down this path, where you simply don't have a strong company culture around privacy, you also start to simply lose your USPs if they were privacy and security. And unfortunately, also at Wire, they also got lost a bit over the years. So there were some things which that proved to be a success, I would say, with the work I did. So I think so far I've talked quite a bit about the struggles. I think now we come a bit to the lighter part about this. So I would say in the sales part, I think qualification is simply key when you're selling privacy-focused products. And I also think that sales is a lot about saying no to customers. At least if you want to win in the long term. And I've seen colleagues basically jumping on every lead which came in and just trying to simply sell the product without really knowing what is the problem the customer tries to solve and is the customer actually interested. And I instead always tried to be very, very strict when it came to qualifying a new lead. So I wanted to first figure out if there was a willingness to pay for privacy and security in the first place, because otherwise you always end up with this feature comparison, which you don't want to have at all. Or if there was some openness to understand why privacy and security are important and why the customer might have a problem. Or at least I also try to understand if what the customer wants to have is also something we can actually offer. And if, let's say, if all this was a no, to me, that was simply a lost game. And I wanted to save the customer and also myself time by telling them that this is probably just not a match. And I also try to give them an idea of what Wire could solve in their company and simply leave the door open in case they come back at a later time, like when they had a privacy breach, for example, or data breach.
It feels like, I just want to comment on that. It is not something that you often hear from salespeople, that you have to say no. So it feels like what made you a good salesperson for a privacy first product was being a privacy first salesperson instead of being a sales first salesperson.
Might be. I think it was just perhaps also a good match between the product and also my background, most probably. So that was definitely working out quite well, I would say, yeah.
Great. I'll let you finish. I have thousands of more questions, but I'll let you finish.
Great. And so what else I always try to simply do at Wire was always to simply solve the actual problem the customer has. So very often you also see, or what I've seen at least in sales, is that salespeople try to sell some extras, which are not actually solving the customer's problem. But very often they just try to even hide an absolute necessary feature, which is not there. And also at Wire, I often saw colleagues which were simply too salesy, I would say, and just struggled with them in the end signing the contract because they were just over-promising what the solution was not or couldn't achieve for the customer. And so my approach was always and probably one other aspect here is also that very often you also see kind of like managers trying to interfere in in the relationship between the salesperson and the customer. And also there, my approach was always to simply protect the customer from that, and simply try to find solutions which really solve his pain points. And I also would say I also saw that the customer and myself more as a team, where we simply try to find a solution which works for them. And so I kind of positioned myself somewhere between the customer and Wire, where I simply try to balance out both sides. And one example here is when one very large customer tried to introduce Wire as a solution. They simply didn't have a budget to buy Wire for the entire organization. And on the other side, Wire was missing lots of features to cater for the entire company. But we both knew that this had potential. We just need to be patient, because we knew that the features makes a lot of sense. The features will be there in a few years. And then in the meantime, we just need to figure out a way how to balance these two sides out. And we basically started a very small proof of concept with just a few users. And Wire simply continued to have functionalities. And 2 years after, this is one of the largest customers. And so without finding this balance between the two sides, such a customer might have been lost early on. And the last thing I would say, which proved as a success, was to simply be as transparent and honest as possible. Because I would say there's probably nothing more annoying than a salesperson who is just overselling their product, which in the end just turns out as a waste of time for both sides. And I always try to simply be very transparent with the customer, telling them what features we might have, which we will never have, or what progress we made on a requested feature or a bug. And one example here is probably with one large government customer, which I have, which wanted to simply deploy Wire in a ultra complex environment, which you can imagine in a government environment, which we have never done before. But we already established a very good relationship where both sides could rely on each other. And I simply told him that we are not sure if we can hold this deadline. And also, I didn't really know how much time we will need to figure out if we can actually meet this timeline or not. So we just had more question marks than answers for him. But we, at the same time, had a very specific time window when the solution needs to be up and running. So he was obviously not super happy about this, but he appreciated the honesty. And in the end, we made the deadline due to a fantastic development teamwork. But without being honest to the customer in the first place, we would simply have risked the entire project if we didn't make it. So to end with a very cheeky punchline, I would say, this is basically a story how I became the most successful salesperson at Wire without actually being a salesperson. And if there's one thing which you can take away from this talk, I would say it's probably that you should always try to solve the customer's problems, no matter in what part of the no matter which role you have in your company, because you can solve the problems of customers in every role, basically. And privacy products are most probably also harder to sell, but it's not impossible. And also more and more customers simply demand also this privacy. But I also think that salespeople just need to become experts of what they are selling, and also knowing very deeply what a solution is doing and what it's not doing.
Great, Julian, thank you so much. It is actually very refreshing to hear this other focus on privacy, and unfortunately, I don't have the time to ask all of the thousand questions that I have for you. But at least maybe we can cover one in the next 3 minutes that we have left until the final talk, which is going to be a panel discussion. So Wire is obviously, it sounds like the product is doing the right thing. It is privacy by design. It is privacy first. It is trying to solve a problem that needs a solution. But at the same time, it's such a sophisticated product, as you say, to sell, and generally a hard technology to understand and to really articulate its value, to word it in a way that non-privacy or non-security people can understand. So my question is, what was the biggest struggle for you personally in the whole, selling a privacy first product? And what was the best part about it? What was the best thing in selling the product?
Let's start with the latter one. Like the best part was absolutely to meet amazing people, because I was basically able to meet lots of activists and NGOs which did amazing work, which I obviously knew from before. But now I was basically in this position where I'm trying to help them set up their communication in a secure way. And depending on the NGO we are talking about, with just this tool, we were also just saving lives of people. Like we simply had some NGOs working in crisis areas in the Middle East, and the last thing you want to have is that unencrypted message gets intercepted by the not so nice party in that area. And so with Wire, we were simply solving that for them and simply keeping those people in the field secure. And that was great, even though we were sitting in our nice office and on the nice couch, but at the same time, we simply did some great work there. The struggling part, I would say, is I think it's a question how much of a privacy culture you have in the company. So I touched this a bit on one of the slides, where I would say the more or the better company culture you have around privacy in every single department, in the management, on the investor side, the better. Because everyone understands the benefits of it, and everyone also understands what kind of direction we need to go. And if this is not there, you're also just struggling as a privacy-focused salesperson, because you simply miss a bit of support around you.
Great. Thank you so much, Julian. Your view is so useful. And I'm very glad that you found the time and presented on our conference. I think it is super important for us to not stay. I mean, when I say us, I mean those little GDPR fan club that we are kind of forming here, to not stay in the bubble of just the privacy experts focus. So I'm super thankful. I know it's not the easiest position to be in, to come into a privacy conference and speak from a salesperson perspective, but thank you very much.